Eucatastrophe by A Real Sword. Chapter 4. Roman. Thomas is here. Thomas is alive, and Thomas is breathing, and Thomas is really super unconscious, and that just won't do, won't it? Thomas isn't supposed to be this still and unmoving. He should be awake and fabulous, singing riffs and creating new stories and situations, messing around with his friends and conducting lively debates with his sides. But he's not doing any of those things. He's just lying there on the couch, in the sweatpants and loose t-shirt that they'd managed to wrangle him into. Roman doesn't know what to do. It's the worst kind of writer's block. He knows there's probably something he should be doing, but he can't for the life of him work out what the gosh dang fucking hellity heck it's meant to be. He's managed to get most of the mud off Thomas's face and skin and hair, with liberal sponging and a bucket of water and Patton's fussy assistance, but the nuts in his hair refuse to come out, no matter how hard the two of them try. And also, Thomas won't wake up. That's pretty important. They should be doing something about that. They're trying to do something about that. Virgil's tried doing his scariest, "wake up, you've forgotten about that glass of water dangerously close to the edge of the counter" voice. In Roman's professional opinion, not at all that scary. To no avail. Remus had gone full weirdo gremlin creature mode, clambering all over Thomas and yelling at him and shaking him and licking his ears a bit too enthusiastically. Still nothing. Patton had suggested smelling salts, and then admitted he had no idea what smelling salts actually were, just that he had read a bunch of books or something referring to them, and when Logan had explained them for real, had agreed that the chances of finding smelling salts anytime soon was really super low, so yeah, maybe not. Janice isn't helping, because of course he isn't. He's just sitting at the table, frown getting increasingly deep, examining the clothes that Thomas had shown up in. Roman can't really blame him. They're pretty strange and wonderful clothes. It's a sort of dress, or a tunic maybe. Smooth, green material, worn ragged and dirty. Maybe silk, or that smooth, soft, shiny material that all theaters use for fancy costumes. It looks like it would be gorgeous if it weren't in the state it's in currently. Also, there's a lot of alsos right now, but this is a stressful situation, okay? They still can't sink out, or feel Thomas in any sense but physical, or do anything. Roman misses his sword quite desperately. His pulse is fine, concludes Logan, looking up. He's sitting next to Thomas on the couch, running through what he says is all the basic first aid he knows. It's more than fine, actually. It's a normal resting pulse rate, almost as if he's awake and aware. But he's not, says Roman. He's just lying there, like a boring vegetable. Very handsome and humanoid vegetable, but still a boring one. Zucchini, maybe. Should we call Joan? Patton asks. Or the police, or someone. I mean, Thomas is here. That's a good thing, right? We should call off the whole missing persons thing. Everything is going to be okay now. He's here and he's back. But is he really? Virgil asks, eyes narrowed. Patton recoils. Virg, can you not do the whole paranoia thing right now? It's really not. Of course it's him. I mean, look at him. They all look at Thomas. He isn't moving. None of his usual sleep twitches or scattered sentences. Silent as the grave. Pale-faced, damp hair plastered across his forehead. He really honestly could be dead. Roman fights the urge to go check for a pulse himself, mainly because he doesn't know where he should be checking. Medicine really isn't his strong suit. We've all tried sinking out again, yeah? Virgil says, to a chorus of reluctant nods. And there's nothing. If this was actually Thomas, we'd be able to feel him. Feel something. Anything. But there's just nothing. This is a Thomas-shaped shell the fairies fucking dumped on our doorstep. Roman thinks it's kind of interesting how they've all just accepted that fairies are behind this all, which is obviously the case, and it was stupid that they had been denying it in the first place. Either that, or everyone's just using fairies as a convenient place to lay the blame for everything that's gone wrong, which, fair, actually. We should be calling the hospital, Logan says. He's not waking up. His pupils aren't responding, and they are highly dilated. He's not responding to pain stimuli. This is essentially a coma. Patton's shriek of, "A coma!" is only barely louder than Remus's angry, bewildered, "Okay, how are we all not dead yet?" Not to derail this fascinating discussion or anything, interrupts Janice, voice perfectly calm and even, but I think we might all want to have a look at this. This turns out to be a string of slightly crumpled flowers that Janice holds up in one gloved hand. Huh. He hadn't been wearing gloves when they'd been researching. He must have put them back on at some point. But never mind that. The flowers. What's up with the flowers? They're vibrantly colored, strung together inexpertly into a loop. Red merging into orange, into yellow, into... "Hold on," says Roman. "Hang on just 1 second. Isn't that Thomas's flower crown? Where did you get... Didn't we leave that in the forest?" "We did," Logan confirms. "Was Thomas carrying that?" Janice just nods and tosses the rest of the tattered green tunic to the table. "Stuffed in the pockets. There's nothing else there, though. I checked." "Ooh," coos Patton. "That dress has pockets?" "He must have gone back to the clearing," says Virgil, and his eyes go wide. "Oh my God, that's a half-hour drive from here. Logan, how long would it take to walk that?" 6 hours, I think," Logan says, and then his brain catches up to his mouth, and he also freezes. Sweet mother of Robert Hofstadter. Forget us, how is he still alive?" Virgil is now propping Thomas up and trying to examine him, as if for clues. "Well, his feet are a fucking mess. That checks out." "He walked for 6 hours?" Patton practically wails. "I think we're all ignoring the most important part here," says Roman. "He was in the clearing again. You know, the place we joked about having a fairy ring in it? He's wearing strange clothing, and he looks like he's been dragged backward through several thorny bushes at painfully high velocity. 3 times, blindfolded." "What does that have to do with anything?" Remus demands. Roman holds his ground. "I'm saying that he probably escaped from wherever they took him, but he didn't manage to bring everything back with him." Hums Janice. "There's something missing." Patton scrambles up to join Virgil and Logan and Thomas on the couch. He barely touches Thomas for a second before he recoils like he's been shocked, and then immediately scrambles to press his hands to Thomas's chest, face screwed up in intense concentration. "His heart's wrong," he says, after a moment of this, and the way he intones it is so serious and unlike him that Roman does a double take. "What do you..." Roman begins. "I don't know what I mean," huffs Patton, visibly frustrated. The heart's my area, you know? And I know when there's something wrong there. It doesn't mean I always know exactly what's wrong with it, but I can feel it's off." Logan frowns in that particular little way of his. That little frown that says, if things keep going the way they're going, I'm going to get seriously ridiculous ticked off, so you'd better all start making sense right this instant, so help me God. Or maybe it doesn't mean that at all. "That sounds horrifyingly unempirical," he says, "and not helpful in the least." "Well," says Roman, "I think it's pretty obvious what we need to do now." A pause. "No?" Virgil scrunches up his face. "What?" "Thomas came back from that forest," Roman says. "That's where he got the flowers from. Whatever he lost, he left it there. And nobody else is going to get it back. At the very least, we might end up finding something, some sort of clue." "You're not suggesting that we go back," says Logan incredulously. "At this time of night? For no reason other than we might find something there?" "Do we really have any other leads to follow?" Roman retorts. "And do we really want to leave Thomas like this for another moment longer?" There's a very long pause. "I'll go get the car keys," says Virgil. "Phone charger," says Janice, swiveling neatly on his heel to hurry into the other room. "And water and flashlights." I suppose I'll write a note for Joan," Logan says reluctantly. "Or whoever it may concern, just in case something happens." "Excellent," sighs Roman, although it really isn't anything of the sort. "In that case, you two can help me carry Thomas to the car. He's certainly not going to be any help." "Wait," says Virgil, freezing. "You all should probably go raid Thomas's closet before we go." "What?" says Patton. "Why?" "Because, no offense, but absolutely none of you are dressed for walking through a forest late at night," replies Virgil. "Especially if we're all actually, real this time." He gestures at his hoodie and jeans and comparatively sensible sneakers. "I should be good, but, Logan, I'm sorry, if you wear that suit, you're going to die." Logan looks momentarily offended by the very concept of having to change out of his eternal stuck-up college professor look, but then frowns and nods, acquiescing. "Fine," he says. That's reasonable. We should all do that." "Not to worry, I'll just imagine us up some fabulous, fashionable finery, absolutely fit for forest exploration," Roman announces brightly, raising his hand to do just that. Janus returns with a canvas bag full of the items he had mentioned before and what looks like several bottles of water. "Sure you will," he says. "How's that going for you?" "Oh," Roman mutters, as he realizes once more that his usual bring anything into existence powers aren't working. At all. He lowers his hand. Fuck. "I'll get the clothes," Patton says quickly. "Hopefully Thomas has enough spare pairs of shoes." One quick fashion montage later, and they all look almost like normal human beings. Except, the whole all more or less identical thing. Patton's just swapped out his usual dad shorts for some jeans. Virgil's wearing his usual getup, completely unchanged, which is so unfair it's unbelievable. His brother's just wearing a normal t-shirt and another pair of jeans and a hoodie. Granted, he had speedily and pointedly taken a pair of scissors to all those articles of clothing and roughed them up real good before even starting to put them on. But it's still completely bizarre to see him wearing something that doesn't look like it was pulled straight out of the "Donate to Nearest Rubbish Tip ASAP" section of the community theater costume rack. Roman's stolen that cool red leather jacket of Thomas's, found a button-up that's not too hideously objectionable, and thrown his sash over the top of it all for good measure. Logan's just switched from jeans to sweatpants and the single other pair of sneakers that Thomas owns, and Janus has elected to completely change things up, a turtleneck of all things, and a ratty-looking yellow scarf that Roman swears none of them ever bought. He hasn't even got his hat on. He looks like a completely different person. He and Remus half-lift, half-dragged Thomas to the front door together, grumbling at each other and arguing more in huffs and facial expressions than any actual spoken language. It's only when Patton pulls the keys from the rack near the door that they all realize that none of them have ever actually driven a car before. "Well, obviously I know the theory," Logan says. "Thomas knows how to drive, ergo I should be able to as well. I don't foresee this being a problem." "But knowing the theory doesn't mean anything when it comes to real life," Virgil objects. "What if we crash? That'd be a real good way to end this fucked up little adventure of ours, crashing the car and dying while trying to drive to a place that might not even be any help to us at all." "I get where you're coming from, Overthink 182. Really, I do. But we've never accomplished anything by not giving it a decent go." Roman huffs, frustrated, and adds, more to get things moving than anything else, "Look, if none of you want to, I will." "I'm perfectly willing," Logan says, grabs the keys, opens the front door. The night is pleasant and warm, a complete change from the previous night. "Out of all of the things that may go wrong from this endeavor, my driving will not be one of them." "What if we get pulled over?" Patton asks frantically. "None of us have driver's licenses." "Oh, for the love of—" Janus snatches Thomas's wallet from the entrance hallway table and shoves it into Patton's hands. "Use Thomas's. We all share his face." "That's illegal and immoral," Patton protests, like they're not all dragging a half-conscious body out into the woods at 9 p.m. to do some extremely questionable exploration in the darkness of the trees. "The police—" "Fuck the police," Janus says firmly. "And no, Remus, that was not a suggestion. Wipe that expression off your face. Come on, let's go." They pile into the car. Thomas gets the middle back seat because he's not awake to complain about it, and they crush themselves around him, 2 on each side, Roman riding shotgun next to Logan. Logan starts the car with a twist of his wrist. "Are we sure about this?" Virgil begins. "No," says Logan, and throws the car into reverse. It goes rocketing backwards too fast, causing everyone to yell out in a simultaneous chorus of panic. He slams on the brakes before they can slam into anything important, like a tree or someone's house. "All right, let's try that again. Less acceleration, I think." "Yes, please," Patton agrees fervently, halfway muffled by Janus's shoulder. "I like my brains where they are, Lo, not spattered across the windscreen." Logan sets off down the road. It's a bit bumpy and jerky, but he knows what he's doing, and he's getting better at it with every passing second. Muscle memory or something. He also knows where he's going, apparently, even in the dark. Nobody they pass yells or otherwise points out the impossibility of somebody's scattered personality fragments driving a car, nor are they pulled over for any other reason, like having 7 people crammed uncomfortably and illegally into a 5-seater car. This is probably a good thing, but also kind of worrisome for some reason that's hard to pin down. Roman suspects that Logan's pushing the speed limit a bit because it takes them 20 minutes to get to the forest, rather than the solid half-hour it had taken them before. They park in the lot just at the edge of the pines. Just like before, there's nobody there, but all of a sudden, Roman really doesn't like the look of the trees. It might just be because of last night's traumatic forest-related experience, or maybe it's the way that they look different without the sunlight filtering through them, or more likely, a combination of the two. Janice and Virgil haul Thomas out into the rocky car park, supporting one of his arms around each of their necks. He's still completely unresponsive. Roman catches Janice looking devastatingly worried out of the corner of his eye. There's something close to sorrow and close to panic on his face, as he mutters something at Thomas under his breath, although it's gone the moment he actually registers that Roman's looking at him. "So what?" says Remus. "We just go and find that clearing again? Kind of a shitty plan, if you ask me. And I'm the unmitigated king of shitty plans." "Next time," Virgil growls, "maybe bring that up before we drive all the way out here to do it." "Didn't it take us, an hour to get there last time?" Patton says. "Maybe we should leave Thomas here. One of us can stay back." "No!" exclaims Roman before he's even aware he's saying it. A beat passes, and then he says, "No, I believe that he has to come with us for this." "Sure," says Janice wearily. "Why not? It makes just as much sense as the rest of this delightful evening so far." So they go into the forest, looking to find a clearing of trees in an eerily perfect circle. Roman has Thomas in a bridle carry, which he's surprised he can actually manage, considering the loss of all their more improbable abilities, but apparently Thomas is strong enough to lift himself, which is a very excellent fact that he will urge Thomas to scatter liberally into conversations from now on if they survive this. Thomas is dead weight in his arms, and provides absolutely no interesting conversation whatsoever. Roman would be mildly theatrically annoyed if he wasn't so unsettled. Thomas is always there to talk to. He's a constant, no matter if they're awake or asleep or anywhere in between. And he's right here, but it still feels like he's missing a limb, or a heart, or some other very essential to survival organ. "Penis," Remus suggests, which is how Roman realizes he's been monologuing to himself under his breath all this time. He grits his teeth and resolves to keep all future adventure notes purely internal. His witty commentary does not need an incidental peanut gallery. Logan's navigating again. They're following the dirt path with the aid of multiple flashlights and Thomas's phone, and it's dark enough that even Roman is getting nervous, which means that Virgil's tense enough to snap a tree in half just by being in close proximity to it, and Patton's keeping up a constant rambling string of puns that seems more reflexive than conscious. About 5 minutes in, Logan stops and says, "Do you hear that?" Roman stops, hefting Thomas in his arms, his shoulders getting sore, which is a novel and unwelcome sensation. Having a physical body that makes sense in the real world sucks, actually. He listens. "Is that the stream?" "I didn't think we were that close yet," Patton notes with an audible frown. The sound of rushing water is coming from their left. It's loud and getting more obvious and distinct with every passing second. "Hey," says Virgil, "I don't like this." "Not surprising. There's nothing about this situation to like," Logan says. "So we are all going off the clearly marked path into what is probably a really horrible trap or ambush of some sort," Roman starts, and then Remus is already leading them forward, and Logan is doing the same, so he takes that as a yes, and follows the rest of the group. Beyond the dark trees there is not a river. There's not even a thin trickle of stream, although the sound of rushing water is louder than ever. Instead, they're somehow in that clearing, and it's hard to miss that it is, in fact, the very same clearing as before. It's perfectly circular, naturally grown, and when Roman glances back over his shoulder, the path they came from is nowhere to be seen. The moonlight streams in from above, forming large patches of surreal brightness over the unsettlingly green grass, which is so green that it almost glows. And apart from the sound of the water, cascading faster and faster all around them, It's silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. The scattered remains of their flower crowns are still strewn all over the grass. It's an innocuous enough sight, and indeed they don't even appear to have been disturbed in any way. But still, there's something about it that makes Roman very, very uneasy. Very carefully he sets Thomas down on the ground and crouches down next to him, ready to defend him at the slightest hint of anything going wrong. "All right," says Virgil. "We're here. Somehow. What do we do now?" Remus points at the mushrooms surrounding the blackberry bush on the far side of the clearing. "Isn't that what started all of this?" he says. "Maybe we should start there. Tear it up or stomp it to pieces or something. I'll do it. I'm doing it now." Kiddo, no," Patton protests. "That's not a good idea. Let's just stop and take a moment to—" Nope. Remus is stomping at the mushroom circle as viciously as he can. There's a second or so where Roman is convinced that Remus has awakened the anger of old gods or the fairies or something, and the world is about to come crashing down around them in fire and brimstone, etc., etc., but none of that is happening. Seeing Remus wreak havoc on the unsuspecting fungal wildlife isn't even very interesting, and after the first 5 seconds, Roman's gaze wanders. He sees that Logan is giving the clearing as a whole an increasingly worried and wary look, and he narrows in on that because it seems plot relevant. "What's going on, Teach?" Logan visibly swallows. He looks over at Roman. "I've just remembered a certain detail about fairy rings," he says, "if that is what we're dealing with here." "Oh no," Roman thinks. "Oh good," he says with a brightness he doesn't feel. "Feel free to share at any time." "The thing is," says Logan, now watching Remus reduce the remaining mushrooms to puffy, tofu-like shreds with Thomas's most threatening pair of hiking boots, "they don't necessarily have to be formed out of mushrooms." Roman looks up, looks around, looks at the trees. The perfect circle of grass and moss, traced out around them like the center of a dartboard, surrounded by trees. "You don't mean—" he starts, and doesn't finish, because it's at that moment that something shifts, and he reflexively, instinctively presses closer to Thomas. It takes him a full second to actually process what's happened. The trees are gone. It doesn't make any sense. It can't make sense. They were right there, and Roman hadn't blinked or anything, and his surroundings hadn't actually changed, but the trees are gone. They're still in the forest, but there are no trees. Not anywhere. "What on earth?" Logan gasps, sounding a bit choked up. What? "Remus, what did you do?" Virgil growls. The rushing water is louder than ever. It's coming from directly ahead. They're in a forest with no trees, and there's no mist, but also there is mist, and if it's making Roman's head split like someone's taken an axe right down the middle of it, he can't imagine what it must be like for any of the other members of their party who are less creatively inclined. "We should," begins Janice, then stops, then says, "We aren't," then stops again, and then blurts out, "We can't stay here." "The river," says Remus, stumbling backward from where the mushrooms are. They're still there, except they're not. And back into the larger group. "We've got to get to the river." "How do we even know the river's still there?" Virgil demands. "It doesn't look like anything's still here." "It's all there," Roman says. "It's just that we aren't. Not anymore, I think. It's hard to tell." "I don't understand," moans Logan. His hands go up to his hair and he tugs and tugs and then tugs again. "I don't understand." He sounds like he's having to force the words out of his throat. "This isn't right. I don't understand. I don't—" Logan's not built for this sort of situation. Roman just kind of wants to wrap him up into a hug so he doesn't have to look at any of it, but he's got Thomas to deal with, and he's already scooped him up, ready to start walking forwards. And surprisingly, it's Janice who hitches up his canvas bag over one shoulder, takes Logan by the forearms, and starts leading him gently toward the sound of rushing water, murmuring something to him that Roman can't quite make out. Nobody looks happy about the situation, which is fair. It takes them less than a minute to reach the river, which is tangible and real in a way that everything else is not. It's deeper and wider and darker than Roman remembers, rushing past, approaching from no discernible source, and disappearing off into the mist. There are two things worth noting about the river. The first is that there is a small, fragile-looking boat anchored to a rock on the river bank. It contains no sails, no oar, no passengers, nothing. It's the most generic boat you ever did see, and it's bobbing around frantically in the current, apparently waiting for passengers. The second thing worth noting is the ominous-looking figure standing on the river bank, clad in a long, dark cloak. It's kind of impossible to make out the details of their face because of how dark it is and how wrong everything feels right now, but Roman gets the distinct impression that their arrival has shocked and unsettled this person in a major way. "Hello there," Patton calls as they approach. Sorry to bother you, but we're kind of lost. Would you mind giving us directions?" "Directions?" asks the cloaked figure. He definitely sounds startled, and also Scottish. The Scottish accent is hard to ignore. He turns, gazing at all of them in turn. His apparent gaze lingers on Roman for a second, inclining his head at the sight of Thomas in his arms. Then he straightens up. I suppose I can. What on earth are you looking for, out here at this hour of the night?" The sides exchange glances. "Ah," says Logan, who's still leaning against Janice for support. "You know, that's an extremely good question. Our friend is sick," explains Roman after a moment, and indicates Thomas with his chin, still stubbornly unconscious, of course. "We think someone of otherworldly origin might have done something to him, so we're trying to get to—" He hesitates. "Someplace else." "Any ideas?" asks Janice, with the tone of voice that indicates he's not expecting much in the way of a coherent, helpful response. The cloaked stranger regards them for a second longer, and then laughs. "Aha! You'll be looking to go downstream, then. That's easy enough." He steps to one side. "Just take the boat." Everyone processes this very sensible and reasonable offer for a moment. "That does not look safe," Virgil says. "Oh, it's not," said the stranger. His accent really is quite lovely. Roman mentally fills in the blanks that the darkness creates, imagining a wry grin and perhaps an ominous wink or two for flavor. "But it seems to me that your friend doesn't have long left for this world, so do you really have much choice?" "Not long left! Hey!" Remus snaps, and takes a step forward. The stranger matches his pace, neatly moving backward along the gentle curve of the river bank. "Hey! What the hell are you talking about?" "Is Thomas going to die if we don't get him somewhere?" Patton demands, fingers twisting around and around in his jean pockets. "How? Where? Why?" "He's been touched by the Aoshi," replies the stranger, taking another step back. He sounds calm, which is impressive considering that Remus is approaching him with the barely restrained fury of a rabid bulldog. "It's not hard to figure that out. I can practically feel it from where I'm standing." "So," prompts Janice. "So, the only way to reverse a curse or binding from the fair folk tends to be confronting them directly about it," says the stranger. He pauses, and then says, "And could you please call your friend off? I am only trying to help." "Call me off?" says Remus, and then laughs. "Oh, I'd like to see them try." "Remus," says Virgil, low and frustrated. "Come on, let's just—" And then louder, directed at the stranger. "So what? We just get in the boat and float off to fairyland? And then what?" The cloaked figure inclines his shoulders in a slight shrug. "I really couldn't tell you. Figuring that out is your business. I'm only giving you directions." There really aren't very many other options. It's either keep walking into the dizzying wrongness, go back into more dizzying wrongness, or get in the boat. So, yes. The boat looks like it shouldn't fit all 7 of them. It also feels like it shouldn't fit all 7 of them. Once more, they get Thomas situated in the middle, and all just kind of cram themselves into place around him. The boat sinks low in the water, and there are 1 or 2 ominous creaks, but it's not too dangerously unbalanced, and seems like it'll be able to hold them all. "You may need to pay a toll," adds the stranger, stepping back, "but the price shouldn't be all that extravagant. Stop at the town, you'll know when you see it, and safe travels." "Thank you," says Logan. Talking to someone else seems to have almost brought him back from the point of breaking completely. Actually, Roman feels the same way, almost grounded by the reality of someone else being there, knowing what to do. Wait, says Patton, as Virgil leans out to untether the boat from the riverbank, and leans out to address the hooded person now standing where the trees should really be. Where are you going? Don't you need the boat to get somewhere? The figure just laughs from where he's standing on the riverbank. It's very kind of you to worry, Patton, but I'm sure I'll find my way to wherever I need to be, he says. And then Virgil succeeds in unhooking the rope, keeping them in place, and the current sweeps them away like an unfinished thought. Roman most definitely does not scream in a very undignified and most unprincely manner, because that would be mortifying. However, they are going at a downright breakneck pace, and quite a few other people are screaming, so if he does end up making a bit of noise, it's not as if anyone else is going to notice too much. The colors of the treeless forest blur into shades of green and gray around them, streaking into bright white, which it's impossible to discern the origin of, and the water spray is soaking them from head to toe. Squinting through the spray as he hunkers down, Roman can see that Virgil is clinging to Thomas tightly, as if to prevent him from falling out. "He knew my name?" Patton shrieks over the roaring of the river and the rushing of the wind around them. "This is worrying. Isn't anyone else worried by this?" "Quite frankly," Janus bellows back, "I think we have other things to worry about, like, not dying on this boat trip from hell." Almost as soon as he says it, though, the boat slows down. They're still moving pretty darn fast, but it seems like it's possible to communicate without wrecking their lungs screaming, and their surroundings are no longer a complete blur. And actually, their surroundings seem to have changed. Again. "The trees!" Remus screeches. He doesn't have to be screeching, the absolute trash goblin, but it seems that he just wants to anyway. "They're back! Thank fuck!" The trees are back. Actually, it seems like the river is still coasting along the edge of the forest, which surrounds them on both sides. But see, here's the thing. It doesn't look like the same forest they started out in. Instead of tall pines and dense shrubbery, the trees seem to be tall and thin and tightly packed together. Roman sees several impossibly large mossy rocks and what look like abandoned stone structures as they coast along. And, oh yes, here's something important. It's no longer night. The sun isn't visible through the gray clouds obscuring the sky, but is very clearly early morning, going by the fresh, clean feeling in the air and the distant, unfamiliar birdsong. Roman quickly checks on Thomas. He seems undamaged by the frenetic ride. Still unconscious, though. Roman doesn't know why he's bothering at this point. Says Virgil, surprisingly mildly. He adjusts his position in the boat so he's sitting up straighter and glances around. Have we all considered that this is just a fever dream or an acid trip of some sort? Patton makes a noise like he's just choked on something he mistakenly swallowed. "We don't do drugs!" he objects, after another few moments of wordless sputtering. "Maybe you don't," snorts Remus. "Speak for yourself, old blood and guts." "What?" Patton says. "You also don't do drugs," says Logan, cutting neatly over Patton's confusion. "I removed your cocaine supply months ago." Remus frowns. "And what was—" "Pixie sticks," Logan says primly. "I predicted that you would not be able to tell the difference. Unsurprisingly, I was right." "Are we all just skipping over the bit where Virgil suggested that this situation was a mass hallucination?" Roman demands. "Would it even really be a mass hallucination, though?" Logan says, "seeing as we're all the same person." "I'm just saying," Virgil said louder, "maybe Thomas had a bit too much wine last night, or he hit his head going down the stairs. This could all be because we've been running around his imagination like headless chickens for the last day and a half and we just haven't noticed yet." "Okay, first of all, that's fucking stupid," said Remus. "Running around his imagination? Imagination isn't a place, genius." "It isn't?" Patton says, looking disappointed. "Aw, but there's some really great stories about that." "Even if it were," interjects Janus, "do you think that those two," he gestures at Roman and Remus both, "could actually come up with anything on this level?" "I could," Roman says, affronted, and then bumps knees with Remus. "And if I couldn't get some of the more distressing details right, I'm sure my brother could manage it. He's terrifying like that." "Aw, thanks," Remus says with a crooked grin. He looks up, and his eyes go wide. "Damn, that sure is a palace." Roman nearly gives himself a case of severe whiplash, turning around to see what he's talking about, and damn, he's actually right. The forest around them has begun to clear and thin, revealing that the river is winding downwards into a lush valley just underneath a vast, jagged mountain that juts up into the sky like it's trying to impale it upon its peak somehow. Spilling out of the mountain is what looks to be a fortress. Broad, sweeping architecture that's so natural it looks more like it's been grown out of the stone rather than carved. Towers and balconies and windows so big they can even be seen all from this distance away. It's a jaw-dropping sight. "And a town!" adds Patton, scrambling to the front of the boat to see it better, and nearly tipping them over in the process, although he doesn't appear to notice this. "Aw, look at it! It's so cute!" Roman looks down at the comparatively tiny town at the foot of the mountain. It's quaint and medieval in appearance, although the bright lights shining up at them from the tiny windows and rooftops, even from all this distance, are so bright as to appear more electric than natural. "What even is this place?" Virgil says in astonishment. "There's no way we're in Florida anymore. It doesn't even look like America. It doesn't even look like the 21st century. Did we make a wrong turn and end up in Middle Earth?" "Ho there!" comes a cry from the river bank, and their collective attention is torn from the sight of the town and the palace to a diminutive figure who's standing on a tiny functional dock to their right, waving them down with a feathered cap held in one hand. "Ho?" Remus says, perking up. "Where?" The figure on the dock doesn't appear to hear him, which is probably for the best. "You've reached the toll point. Dock here or face a most terrible penalty." "Hi, new person," Patton calls back, waving back as they approach. "We'd love to, but we have no idea how to stop this thing." "What he said," Roman agrees. "Help would be greatly appreciated." The hat-waving person hauls out some rope from where it's been coiled neatly over one of the dock posts, and yells, "Catch this!" before flinging it in their direction. There's a brief, panicked scuffle as all of them try to catch it at once, yelling indistinctly at each other, fingers sliding uncooperative over the slightly damp and faintly slimy rope. Finally, Virgil manages to get a good grip, and, with the person on the dock holding the other end of it steady, they haul their way over so that their tiny oarless boat is flush with the dock. The person on it squashes their cap inelegantly over their wild, curly hair and secures the rope in place along the dock. "Thank you very much, my good, person," Roman says, panting a bit from exertion. "This has been a very turbulent journey so far, let me tell you." "Of course," they reply cheerily. Their accent is also Scottish, Roman notes, and wonders if they've somehow, improbably, ended up in Scotland of all places, and then perform an admirably comical double take as they get a good look at Roman's face. "Good Lord, it's you!" "What?" says Roman blankly, even as the cap-wearing person, dressed quite notably in some sort of brown, medieval-looking tunic covered in all sorts of pouches and pockets, hurries up at the edge of the dock to get a proper look at everyone in the boat. "Sorry, do we know you?" There's something weirdly familiar about them, although he can't quite place his finger on it. "I would not think so, no," they say, "but all of you! It's extraordinary, it really is. You look exactly like him." "Huh?" says Patton. Logan says, "I see. I take it you met Thomas at some point while he was here last night?" "Twice, as a matter of fact," they say. They sit down at the edge of the dock, cross-legged. Poor fellow, he was quite beside himself on the way here, and even more distressed on the way back. Quite frankly, I'm astonished he managed to make it all the way back to you. "So were we, to be perfectly honest." Logan runs a hand through his hair. "You don't have any questions about us? Our state of existence?" "Well, you're the physicalized extrapolation of his overall personality and mental states of being, aren't you?" There's a pause as they all process this. "Yes," agrees Virgil. "Yes, we are, but how the fuck do you even know that?" "Thomas mentioned it," they say with a half-grin, "in passing, although it was very scattered and extremely vague and I only understood parts of it. Meeting you all in person clarifies only a very small amount of it all." "In that case, we are Thomas Sanders, I guess," says Patton with a wry little smile. "Hello." "As charming as that little point of rhetoric is, we all do have proper names," points out Logan. "Logan Sanders. That's Roman, he's Patton, and..." Quickly and efficiently he introduces everyone in the group, "and you apparently already know Thomas." "Shane Sheen D'Arc, at your service," they reply, tipping their hat with a flourish. "Tollkeeper, local river guide, a pleasure to meet you all." Likewise, says Logan calmly. Shane, we were told that Thomas had been cursed by the Fae, and that the best way to resolve that curse was to go confront them directly. Then if I understand the circumstances correctly, you'll be looking for the Earl King, says Shane. Down to the town, and all the way up the mountain. He's hard to miss. Although, before you go, I'll need payment. Payment? Remus shrugs, and then reaches for the zipper of his jeans. Well, if you insist. No, says Janice, shoving him back. What do you want? I'm warning you, we don't really have all that much between us, and personally I'm extremely disappointed that capitalism still exists in this fantasy world we've apparently ended up in, so... I'm not all that choosy, Shane says. Anything of value will do. I wouldn't ask, you all seem to be in a hurry, but rules are rules. Janice digs into the canvas bag of supplies that he's apparently still carrying, and produces an iPhone charging cable? Here. He hands it to Shane without so much as a twitch in his expression. This is an artifact of great power. Shane accepts the charging cord, examining it with interest. This will do, they say, fingering the plastic casing and the metal USB drive at the end. But, Patton starts. Roman elbows him and he shuts up, although he looks unhappy about it. Good luck, all of you, says Shane, standing up and unhooking their boat from the dock. I have a feeling you'll need it. Everyone waves goodbye, except Thomas, who's too unconscious to do that. Seriously, the amount of coma he's in right now is unbelievable. Shane lets go of the rope and they're off again, coasting down the river on a swift current that's sweeping them closer and closer to the town at the bottom of the valley. If you were going to complain about how giving a medieval toll person a piece of anachronistic technology is immoral, says Janice when they're an adequate distance away from the docks, I invite you to suggest something else I could have given them. No, actually, says Patton. Charging cables are expensive, that's all. Next time give them a bag of granola. A pleasant 10 seconds of silence occurs before the next topic of dilemma arises like a kraken rearing its ugly heads from the depths of the Mariana Trench. They said the Earl King, Logan notes, frowning. What about it? Roman replies. That's a term for the King of Fairies. Sounds to me that's exactly who we're looking for. That's true enough, but Earl King is a German word, and all evidence up to now suggests that the mythology we're dealing with is Scottish in origin. He gestures back toward the dock, which is already retreating into the distance behind them. Shane, that person at the river, the Tamlin illusion, the owl-she being name-checked, but this... Logan falls silent, and his frown deepens. Roman feels a sudden tightening of dread in his stomach, and he doesn't entirely know why. Logan doesn't say anything else for the rest of the boat trip.